Hello, and welcome to the Corolosophy Podcast. This is episode 67, part 2, Growing Access in a Greenhouse with Vince Peterson. This is the continuation of the last partial episode in which Vince Peterson and I really dig into some solution-based conversations around diversity, equity, inclusion, access, more importantly. I'm very unlikely to give much credence to a person who is critical of the music education practices of their colleagues if they have nothing better to point to. Criticizing is easy. Building something better is hard. Show me your program and how your ideas have shown results, and then I am more likely to listen. I appreciate what Vince is doing here. His criticism is that the conservatory is not diverse enough. Okay, I hear you. I agree. Then my question is, what are we going to do about it? And I don't mean getting on a webinar to complain about it. Spreading the word, people get it. We've spread the word. We know. Everyone knows this. Everyone knows that this is something that needs to be worked towards. I am now interested in what do we do? What are your steps? What is something better? And show me the results as you go. That is part of the conversation that you are about to hear with Vince Peterson because he has an idea. He is creating something. It's a new model, and I'm going to let him tell you about it, but we will be picking right up from where we left off in part 1, where Vince and I really get our hands dirty discussing what we see as one of the many important paths forward in improving the way music education, more specifically conservatory training in particular, is delivered in terms of philosophy. What are the barriers to entry, and how does he think he can solve them with his project, technology, and really everything in between that goes into this conversation. Like I said, it's solutions based. These are things to try. And it could be that some of the things he tries don't work, and then he will retool and try again, because that is really what we all should be doing in our classrooms. This episode is going to come out towards the second half of May, and that means school years are ending soon, and you could be thinking ahead to next year, which means that when you listen to this show, you always have this stable of affiliates on the show that have a promo code where, as you're making purchases for your school year, you can save yourself quite a bit of money just by entering Corolosophy at checkout. If you need sheet music, ryanmain.com, graphitepublishing.com are two websites where you can get that sheet music, high quality stuff that you can print tomorrow. If you're like me and you procrastinate and don't pick out all your repertoire in time, but that saves me lots of times. That has saved me many times in the past. But even when you do plan ahead, you should include Graphite Publishing and Ryan Main in that search, and you will enter Corolosophy at checkout and get 10% off every time you purchase from those websites. And of course, you're going to need choir folders. You're going to need choir robes, which is a great gender neutral solution to your choir uniform needs. If you go to mymusicfolders.com or mychoirrobes.com, you can also enter Corolosophy at checkout for a discount there. And last but not least, Sight Reading Factory is, of course, a must. At any level of choral music education, really any music education, should have a membership, in my opinion, to sightreadingfactory.com for themselves, the teacher, and for every single student. It is just too powerful of a tool to pass up. And of course, every time you renew each year, you can enter Corolosophy at checkout. All right, everybody, taking you to the second half of my conversation with Vince Peterson. So we're going to switch gears just a little bit, although I don't think it's going to be much of a gear shift, because it sounds like from talking to you that you, over the course of our conversation, you've kind of let out a little bit of your feeling of criticism, I guess, about some of the ways in which we teach music and have done for a while. And you've got this institute that you do, and I imagine that that's probably generated some ideas over the last few years in your mind about different ways to instruct and different ways to give musical experiences. I know I'm in a similar boat with the institute we do, and sometimes I feel like I can get kids to a musical mountaintop in 3 days that takes me 3 months at school. And there are certain types of things that I'm critical of in that sense. So you've got this project going. I believe it's called, is it Greenhouse Music? Is this there's an educational module that you're trying to create? Is that correct?
Yeah. So, I guess I'm somebody who is known for having an entrepreneurial spirit. And I just like to sort of say that I'm just basically the stupidest one in the bunch who's willing to try things and fall flat on my face, and skin my knee. And sometimes things take and sometimes they don't. But this this is the world's first higher education, fully online music conservatory. And the way I think of it is as a deputized, mobilized techniques of music and theory and musicology department that can go anywhere and be with anyone anywhere, to supplement, enhance, and improve their music education, improve their process of becoming their fullest musical self. And in particular, this school is meaning to address matters relating to access, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I got really tired of hearing my students at the school where I teach currently is comprised predominantly of students of color. And I got tired of hearing them resign themselves to certain realities that are real to them. That'll never be possible for me. I'll never be able to go to a school like that. I'll never be good enough to do that, and it's okay. And I'm just going to let it go. And and then you listen to them sing or you listen to them play, and you're like, just oh my God, So I'm in this continuing process, exploring for myself, just for my own identity as a white cis gay male, what I have to offer, how do I do my part, to flip the script, to balance, to right the wrongs. I mean, I'm not going to right them all personally, but am I doing what I can do? And it was bothering me, and I was not able to sleep at night. And I finally had this voice in my head say, well, you can do something about this. I mean, you've been doing all this private teaching, you've taught in colleges, this environment, the problems and the systemic issues, that face us all. You can do something about it. You can at least put a drop in the water. And so Greenhouse Music, which is in its infancy, it's just beginning, is a first stitch attempt at doing that. We've started an ADEI scholarship fund, which has raised a good amount of money in its first month or two. We are developing new ways to look at the ear training and theory curriculum that are more inclusive repertoire-wise, but are also repackaged in terms of their language. So I'll just give you one example. I believe that the term ear training is a flawed term. I think that it's a misnomer. It doesn't really say the full scope of what the purpose of that class is. So ear training can be rhythm training. It could be intensive rhythm training. It could be synthesis, page to eyes, to ears, to hands, speeding that up. It can be score reading, musically multitasking. It's not just about intonation and intervals and accuracy. It is about that to some degree, but there's so much more to it. So what it ultimately is to me is it's about becoming fluent in the language. It's the equivalent of a language arts class or whatever. So we're calling it music fluency at Greenhouse. And it's a 12-week trimester-based course once a week for 90 minutes. Includes the types of activities that you would have in a regular ear training / dictation course, but done in a very different way, in a very different kind of environment, with no grading, no auditions, and no pre-qualifiers other than a person's own level of comfort, with the material. So, it takes away all that stuff that feeds the monster of judgment that's within us, and it tries to level the playing field, and it offers itself to anybody who needs it.
Okay. Now, so for a class like this, or for really any of your curriculums that you're designing, who exactly is the target audience in terms of are you shooting for preparing people for the collegiate level for being instead of of college? Like where are you trying to slide into the education market, so to speak?
So ironically, that's the other place where it's really outside of the box. And it's a difficult thing because from a business standpoint, of course, who's your target audience, right? 20 to 30-year-olds, right? Like college age and graduate school age. Sure, of course. But in a conservatory, where I went at Mannes, and I know this to be true at Juilliard, Manhattan School, Oberlin, many other places, you have people of all ages and all stages of their development, sometimes in the same section of a core class like ear training. So in my ear training coursework at Mannes, there were undergrads and grads in our class at the same time. It just what mattered was where that person was, in their development, but everybody had to complete the sequence.
Hmm.
Um, and so this is extended at Greenhouse Music to what a regular school would call an evening division, or a you know um, community enrichment, or even preparatory division of the school. I can see a market for retired people who are really interested in music, who sing in their choir, who might play in a community orchestra or chamber group, wanting to increase their fluency, wanting to speed up their synthesis and become more fluent in the language of music, of Western music, that is.
Hmm.
And so to have all those people together in one space also contributes to the leveling of the playing field. It also forces, frankly, the metaphor that we ourselves as humans are like music. It's all made of the same stuff, right? No matter what type, genre, the way it looks, where it comes from, it's all made of sound and time. It's all made of the same atoms, the same molecules.
Right. Yeah, no, that's that's great. I want to drill on another thing that you talked about earlier too, because I'm curious. So you mentioned that part of your mission and part of your reason for starting this is that you do see yourself as being a possible cog in the machine, I guess you could say, towards progress for diversity, equity, and inclusion. In
Mhm.
what way do you see that playing out? Like if everything goes exactly the way you dream it to go, how is it that you are helping in that area exactly?
By eliminating the traditional mechanisms of entering a conservatory style environment. Um, a few of the main barriers to access, right, will be tuition. We have started this scholarship fund, which enables students uh, who want to take advantage of our ADEI program to take classes completely for free.
Okay.
Um, so that's one thing. So that gets rid of that barrier. Um, so it might be that a person is, um, a lover of Mozart and they want to study in classical school, but there's a financial barrier there for them that doesn't allow them to access this type of training. And conservatory training, I want to be very clear. Conservatory training is a very specific, type of thing within music, and
Hmm.
all of it is valuable. But this is what we do. We do this sort of like world class world class conservatory training in the traditional manner, and frankly, in the Franco-Russian manner. And so that's one. The other is the audition process. Um, so sometimes a person, can't access these courses because their entrance to the school is based on an audition that they played on their instrument, and they might have better musicianship than they have technique on their instrument or what have you, and they might still be exploring. One of the things people don't do is they don't go into music school undeclared. Like if you're going to be a clarinet major, you're going to be a clarinet major, and we sort of write that off as a foregone conclusion. And to change majors in a music school is like, clutching my pearls. It's like this crazy thing I did. When I was an undergrad, I changed majors, and it was like the dean looked at me like I was, you know, turning blue, in front of her. But So this eliminates that antiquated process, and it sets the beginning of a person's work with us off on a foot other than that of judgment.
Right. Okay. So
Um,
this making more sense to me now because so if um because one of the well, I'll just frame it this way. One of the great debates in education right now is when we talk about gaps of access.
mhm.
Are we eliminating the gaps of access by lowering the bar, or are we eliminating gaps of access from the bottom up? In other words, how we do if the issue is that there are groups that aren't achieving X, and then do we lower X, or do we figure out a way to raise the students to that point? And because this is just now my own opinion, but because education is oftentimes administered by bureaucrats who are outside of the classroom, not working with kids, the easy answer for a bureaucrat is to lower the bar. Because once you lower the bar, your job as the bureaucrat is done. And then the teachers get to, check success boxes, right? So it sounds like and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like what you're trying to do is to take the kids who do want, or the young people, or, young adults who do want this high level conservatory training, and still give that to them, but doing it by trying to raise the level, raise the student to the bar rather than lower the bar to the student.
I would say that it's I would say that for me, I don't view it as a, you know, lower coming up or upper coming lower. I
Hmm.
view it as a lateral process.
No matter
So
where they start on the process, that you can get them there.
yes,
Yeah. Got
and
it.
that is because I believe in these techniques, which are 100, 150 years or more old, have been time tested. We've made so many innovations in music education, and I'm proud when I read the journals and I look at the things that colleagues accomplish. However, I think some of the things, there are some things that you know got abandoned in the process that are still extraordinarily valuable tools.
Yep.
But I would just go back to the one other piece to the puzzle that I think should remain part of the conversation, which is repertoire. I recently heard a head of a music department in a very major school, whose name I will not share, um, literally say to the faculty out loud, well, if we want more Black students to come to this school, we have to expand the jazz program. And my response to that was, so what? Black people don't like Mozart?
Yeah. And
And then once they get in, we meet another barrier, and it's not a barrier of an access necessarily, but it's a barrier of continuation, right? Or continuance. And it's that students of color are just not seeing music by people who look and sound like them. Frankly, that's a short way of saying people who are from their same cultural or background of heritage.
right.
They're not seeing music by those people used or referred to as masterworks or as masterfully done and used in the classroom as a teaching platform.
Right. Yeah. And I
We've
wonder if that guy, I wonder if that administrator has seen how white high school jazz bands tend to be. Um, I don't know that. I don't know what he's
well,
even thinking about
look,
that.
and as far as I'm concerned, and having been a secondary school teacher for many years, I'm not currently, but I was for 20 years,
Hmm.
right? Um, and so I share that. I share all the things that those people face. I mean, they're my heroes. My high school choir teacher was basically saved my life,
Hmm.
seriously. And so, and that he's why I'm a choir, director today. But but I would just say that if it's happening at the college higher education level, what hope do we stand at secondary? Because everything today is about numbers. It's about teaching you the test. It's about quantifiable results, qualitative by some one size fits all standardized way. But, as choir directors, you and I especially know that it just doesn't work that way with human beings. You never teach the student you wish you had. You meet the student you do have where they're at,
Yep.
right? And you don't pull them kicking and screaming up the ladder because it's about status. You invite them into the reflection and the discernment about who they are. You hold the mirror up in front of them, the way I just did with you when we did the music credo exercises. All I'm doing is holding the mirror up, and sometimes the person is going to like what they see, sometimes they're not.
Right.
But this isn't about that. It's about these people that we're talking about. They haven't even had the chance to have the mirror held up in front of them. And when it is held up, it isn't about their musicianship at all. It's about the color of their skin. It's about their gender. It's about, their insert here any number of other superficial things that have nothing to do with music.
Right. So continuing to find the metaphor that makes this ring true in my mind. So I used the metaphor earlier of raising and lowering the bar, and you thought of it more as a continuum, kind of horizontally. And so maybe really what's going on here is that traditionally back, for the last 200 years of conservatories, if you're thinking horizontally, a student has to have moved, to a certain point along the horizontal line, at which point they are deemed qualified to start conservatory training, and then they get to keep going. And your thought is, no matter where they are on that horizontal line, we can start them and get them access to that process, especially because we've got now new technology that allows us to get to places that we wouldn't have been able to get to before. All of that. Are we getting closer to a shared metaphor?
Yeah, I mean, yes, technology is enabling this for sure. It is enabling us to more easily deliver these things. But I think it's also that, if I'm raising the bar for anybody, I'm raising the bar for teachers themselves in their own musicianship, right? One of the big epidemics, frankly, in our country is that a lot of schools, if they deem a person who auditions as being not good enough to enter the performance program, they will still offer that person a position in the music ed program.
Mm-hmm.
And so the message that sends and the effect that sends and the way that does trickle down in the ecosystem into this, is really alarming to me. And I think and that's where the musician's credo comes from as well, is that, I want us as musicians to look at ourselves, myself too, without complacency. And I want us to be our best musical selves so that we can show up for others in the fullest capacity possible.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I was thinking still too about the idea of putting, back to your earlier comment, of putting more jazz in the curriculum to get more Black students. And I just, that mentality is actually pretty rampant in our discussions, I would say. So here's how I would say it. If you're watching a panel of, some experts of who have been really working in the diversity space, those aren't the types of things you'd hear from them, but those are the types of things you'd hear from tons of people who think they're on that team on social media. In other words, you hear it a lot, and you hear things like, if we just program X number of this song or that song by this color of skinned person, then we will solve our diversity problem. And what I've noticed because I've probably taught 3,000 students, my sample size is pretty large, and I'm in a suburb that is diverse enough to where I've had hundreds of kids of every skin color, right? And I can tell you that there just isn't a correlation between skin color and what type of music lights up a kid's eyes.
Exactly.
There just isn't. And so if you're thinking you can predict that because the kid has darker skin than yours, then he or she will like a certain kind of music, then you are missing the point. Because
you're not only missing the point, but you are perpetuating a systemic illness that has gutted, our system and deprived it of a great amount of diversity in terms of, background, interests, raw natural ability, and influence.
Even if you're making that mistake, from the place of, or in the name of diversity.
Right.
And that's the thing. And I think that's the part of the conversation nobody wants to have. And it drives me crazy, is that just because you say you're on team diversity doesn't mean that everything you do will play out towards that end in real life.
And that's what was keeping me up at night.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I can say it until I'm blue in the face, but what am I going to do about it?
And then follow up, is it working?
Right.
And that's the other part nobody wants to talk about. Show me the results of this. Show me how your classrooms are becoming more diverse based on your teaching practices. Show me how the programming choices that you are making are translating into more access. Because I would argue that that's probably not why the kids are showing up to your classroom. They're probably not showing up to the classroom because they noticed that you program 20% Black composers.
I mean, if you knew the number of people, Chris, just conductor colleagues who I've spoken to just recently, let's say when I say recently, I mean the last 3 months, 3 to 4 months, just having a casual conversation. So what are you up to? What are you programming? The number of them who have said to me, well, of course I'm programming, the music, all Black composers for the next 2 years. And my answer to that is usually, that's not the solution. That's not the solution. That is going to cause a surge. We're not programming the music of people who happen to be a different race than us. I mean, it's so superficial, like to even say it out loud. It's like, no, there's not Black composers and white composers. They're just composers. There's not men composers and women composers. There's just composers. But, and it's a big but.
Yep.
Right? Mm-hmm. I think that I sense this trendiness about it, and it makes my skin crawl, frankly. I'm not going to sit here and say that I've been the best, with programming, that I've always known my blind spots and I've always, been aware of the effects of my programming at all times, but I can say that I am committed to doing my part, that I have learned a great deal from a great many people, both of my race and of other races. In this process, I've had a great opportunity to self-reflect. I've had the mirror lifted up in front of me, which is actually kind of rare, because when you're looked at as the conductor, the leader, people they kind of put you here, Mm-hmm. Personally, I mean, I say this all the time, but I feel like I'm the scum under music's foot. That's what I am, but I have had a chance to self-reflect. What am I doing? What am I saying? What are the things that I've done already and said that might have been problematic, without meaning to, and I'm very grateful for that opportunity to look at that. And I'm not saying that Greenhouse Music or any other new initiative is going to solve it for everybody, but I do feel like I want to do everything I can to leverage my white cis male privilege to
and deserve the privilege that you have.
Right.
That for me, like that's the conversation around privilege is also so misplaced, in that I can't change any of the privileges that I have. Like if it's seen within the society and the culture and the context that I'm born into, just like people who are disadvantaged in those ways, I can't change that. But I can work towards deserving things. Like if I'm not going to waste the opportunities that I've been given, and it sounds like what you're saying, and that if you're leveraging certain aspects of your identity that give you opportunities, then what you're doing at the end of the day is you're able to look back on your life and say, okay, so I might have had a leg ahead in this particular area. In my case, I have a leg ahead because I was raised in a really good school district in a suburb that had an excellent music training program, and they thought of music as, in addition to the fact that I'm, a white male, but the I got a head start in music that some kids in other towns don't have. And so, yeah, I think that's really important. And I think of all of the concepts that we are kind of discussing more and more as a profession in the last few years, but really kind of driven by the more activist wing of the diversity groups and the people they're pushing this, and the decolonization movement and all that kind of stuff. The important things that they're bringing to the table. There are lots of ways to have conversations about this, and theirs is not the only way, in my opinion. However, there's probably the most important thing that they bring to the table is the idea of representation. At least how I've seen it play out with my kids, with my students, is that it is true that once, for example, my elite chamber choir at my high school, once I finally cracked the kind of the barrier and could convince a couple of really popular Black senior boys to join the choir, it opened the floodgates for Black kids in the next 10 years that could see themselves. So that's big. However, representation gets them in the door, but it doesn't keep them there. You still have to form relationships with kids. You use the music to do that.
That was going to be my exact addition to what you're going to say, is the repertoire has, we convened an advisory council of very diverse people, different backgrounds, different gender identities, different races, different, different aspects of education, music, profession. And when I said, what is the one thing that frustrates you the most about what you're witnessing in your teaching in a higher education environment in music? Every single person, the repertoire. The repertoire, the repertoire, the repertoire.
What was it about the repertoire that frustrated?
That we're stuck in Western Europe between, 1500 and 1930. And here's the thing that I would say with all my heart. I've come to learn this now. Nobody is asking you or I, as white cis males, to reject the tenets of our upbringing. We're not being asked to become the sacrificial lambs for a movement sake, I think that the question, everybody keeps addressing this question as though it's a question of is it that music or this music? Do we reject that music completely? In the music theory world, there's a big thing going on. Do we reject all of the innovations and the discoveries of Heinrich Schenker because he's purported to be affiliated somehow with the Nazi movement? Was he an anti-Semite? I don't know. I don't know him personally, but I know that what he did in terms of helping us understand the form and analysis of music through counterpoint and graphic analysis is very useful as a tool. So do I say, well, because he was a bad person or purported to be a bad person, I reject everything that he, and there are indeed some people saying, yes, we'll find another way, right? And to me, to each their own, how each person, deals with it. But the question of repertoire, for me, this is not a question of or. It's not them or us, this kind of music or that kind of music, this period or that period, Western or non-Western, but it's a conversation of and, right? Mm-hmm. There is so much still to be learned from and to be had from the repertoire of our upbringing as musicians, such as it has been thus far.
Right. It is, but I'll push back a little bit in the sense that it depends on the level of analysis that we are discussing. Because if we're talking about one teacher in their one classroom with their one school year and the limited time and the limited resources, it is a question of or. In other words, I can't have them do everything. I can't have the kids, especially if I'm thinking I want them to achieve some level of mastery of something in the one year that I have. I'm going to have to choose. I'm going to have to choose some things that are going to be centered and some things, concepts and techniques and things. And we're going to drill those techniques and we're going to drill those concepts. And that will, by its nature, exclude other things. So there is an or. But if you're thinking about the level of analysis of us as a profession thinking about how we educate the next generation of teachers and the next generation of students, then it can be a conversation of and, because then what happens in my classroom based on my skill set and the things that I choose to focus on then does not have to be the same things that your classroom focuses on. And when we zoom out to that kind of 10,000 foot view, we have an education community that is just full of everywhere, and we celebrate that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody's saying that you suddenly have to, you know, drop everything you're doing in your choral music classroom in a secondary environment and teach them only gamelan, for the next year. I think that we can find creative ways. Ask just to respectfully push back a little bit in turn.
Yeah,
I would say that we can find creative ways to use uncommon repertoire for a common learning goal and a common for a core purpose. It does take. I agree, having been a secondary choir teacher for many years, and I understand exactly what you're saying, that you do have to choose because your time is limited. But then it does become a question of, well, what do you choose, and which pieces of repertoire can serve multiple purposes? How can I achieve multiple learning outcomes with one piece?
right.
Is it possible, just from a human point of view, is it possible, and this is meant to be a rhetorical question, is it possible that people from across continents and across 5 centuries plus, that maybe two individuals who write music from 500 years apart could be saying the same human thing? They could be sharing the same human experience, and we
Yep.
start from that.
Mm-hmm.
Could Palestrina, and I'm going to just be really extreme here, so forgive me, but could Palestrina have something to say that the kids are hearing Kanye West say?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, when I first confronted that question, I thought, oh my God. And what happened was a piece for Choral Chameleon came out of it. But I do believe it is the job of higher education and those of us working outside of the secondary education sphere to set the tone. A lot of us, present company excluded, I'm sure, but a lot of us in this country allow big corporations or what have you to kind of dictate to us what we're going to program. And we've come up with this leveling system. We've level 1 piece, level 2, level 3, level 4, and we've done all these things to fit them all in these neat little boxes, and parameters. So I think, how do we break out of that but achieve the learning goals
Yeah.
still?
Yeah. No, that's really well put. And your question about can Palestrina be connected to Kanye? And that's a really, really important. And there are certain lines of narrative. Again, this kind of goes back to my comment earlier about the difference between, let's say, a scholar in an academic setting who studies diversity issues and the way they tend to talk about certain things versus the way we memify these concepts on social media. Because the memified version of this would say that no, Palestrina and Kanye are not connected because one is black and one is white, and one is a kind of white kind of music and one is a not white kind of music, and those are two
I
different.
want to know where you're getting your memes.
Oh, they are all over the place.
I know.
And it's well intended. Again, my critique here is rhetorical, not critique of the intention, but that W.E.B. Du Bois would definitely agree with you that you can connect Kanye to Palestrina. He wrote very extensively about one of the things that he wished for in the future of Black America was that I'm going to probably butcher this quote, but I'm going to get close, which was that he said something like that when Shakespeare calls to my white colleagues, Shakespeare calls to me as well. And that is that are we finding those common humanity themes in our art? And then, the beautiful thing about the example, and I'm just going to keep on this Palestrina Kanye thing because that's great. Because if you've got
Remind me to send you the score.
there's a Palestrina Kanye thing.
Yeah, I commissioned it. It's
No
called
way.
Ultra. It's called Ultra Secret Beam.
Okay, I have to see this. This is crazy. That's awesome. But I love
Listen, I don't preach anything that I don't practice, brother.
that is awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
But I think that would be very in keeping with some of the thinking of Du Bois, like I said, because he really believed that the I guess the crux or the key that you insert and twist is figuring out a way to get the kid who is a Kanye fan to see what was in the Palestrina that they also then care about, and they
Right.
didn't realize why. That's
And
one of my
we
favorite things about repertoire with kids.
and we can't forget the most important part of it. They do share something.
Mm-hmm.
They're both human beings.
Yep. Yep.
That's the most important thing. I mean, I from what I know, a lot of these Renaissance composers, Palestrina, as you know, is dubbed the Prince of Music, not because everybody revered his music so much, although they did, and rightfully so. I'm not demeaning it in any way. I'm a huge fan. But it was because in convincing the bishops at Trent to let polyphony into the liturgy, he opened the gate and allowed so many people to come through and start making a living composing mass settings and motets and things that could be used. I mean, one of the things that my teacher Conrad Sousa always said was, he went to Juilliard, and in the 50s, at that time, it was considered completely verboten to write anything tonal, to use any, it was in the wake of Babbitt's famous essay, Who Cares If You Listen? And he said, I emerged from all that and I could do that. And I jumped through the hoops and did the acrobatics and things. You know, but look, I wanted to write music that was going to be used.
Mm-hmm.
And ironically, the first job that he ever had, he got a Ford Foundation grant that paid his entire living salary and expenses for a year to move to Tennessee and be the composer in residence for a high school district, a public high school district, when there was still segregation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what? I mean, the stories he told about, mind blowing. Mind blowing. He had a front row seat in choral music, how it manifested in choral music,
Yeah.
and we are the people who create, build, refine, and deputize the instrument, the single instrument that is made of people.
Yeah.
Our instrument, my brother, is made of people. There is no other instrument like that. And
Human people.
yeah,
They're all human people with the same physiology on the inside when they make.
everybody poops and pees,
Yep.
buddy.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And when we die, we all shit our pants and then rot. And
Exactly.
that's going to be that, which is ironically the second podcast in the last 3 weeks that I've said that exact phrase on. I don't know what
You're after my heart. You're after my
yeah,
heart.
I did an episode recently with an author who is a universal liberal humanist. That's kind of the philosophical school that she lives in, and we had some of these same conversations. It was pretty great. But my goodness, I could keep going for all night. But let's wrap this up. I really appreciate this, and I think that your ability to help kind of describe some of these things is also unique, because I really feel strongly that the kind of putting a cap on what we've already discussed, in that wanting these changes that we have just discussed and wanting this progress, I'll put it that way, because I do believe that it's not going to be a Band-Aid ripping off. It's going to be a thing that we build together over time. The way we speak about it and the way we reflect upon it and our successes and failures in it matter a lot. And the rhetoric we use when we talk to each other about it is also really important. And that's kind of one of my pet peeves, is that is the way that we talk about these concepts. Is it reaching out to pull people in, or is it drawing more lines between? One of my favorite jokes about this, or just facetiousnesses, which is not a word, which is that back in the early 2000s and 90s, it was smash the binaries. And now it's, well, not those binaries. We need to draw new binaries, which is, how many composers of this skin color did you compose, all that kind of stuff. It's rhetorically could be just more division. And what we should be talking about is the ways that we pull people in to our programs, to our environments, and then ultimately what matters, which is, do those people, once they're there, do they feel valued? And if they feel valued, then we won. We were successful. And if that looks different in my program than it does in your program, that's okay, as long as the end result is people feeling like part of a community.
Yes, and I would say that I would say two things with the full strength of my heart. It really is, for me, it's a third thing, which is just building bridges.
Yeah.
It's just building pathways and bridges. That's all it is. There's no such thing as a barrier or a wall, or what have you. There's only the possibility of connection. I had a former administrative leader of Coral Chameleon say this to me once, and it's always stuck with me. And she said, "We have only two choices in everything that we do in life. One is love, and the other is fear. And you get to choose which one you use at any given time." And speaking of memes, I will end by saying I saw this meme floating around on the internet, and it really also changed my perspective. Things are not getting worse. Things are being revealed. We must hold each other tight and pull back the curtain.
Yeah, that's really well said. That's really well said. I love it. Well, Vince, thank you so much. And this has been a lot of fun. Thanks for being on the show.
I really appreciate you as well.
All right. Okay. So I will let you know as I get closer and closer to having it all edited. I'm thinking what I'll do, since we talked for quite a while. I typically
Sorry, I'm long-winded.
No, it's okay. But I really felt like we kind of got really going. It took us, 15 or so minutes to get past the small talk that I don't like. So I might, just so you know, I don't edit podcasts for content. So I don't edit out
Right.
like the thing you said, but I do sometimes for flow. And so I'll go back through the first like 20 minutes of it. And if it's just kind of us exchanging pleasantries, and then I might cut out some stuff. That way I can try to get it down to an amount of time that I think people will actually click on, because sometimes people get scared of the really
whatever
long
you want, like whatever you want.
Awesome, because I really want people to get into that last part that we were talking about, because that's really important and very timely. So I'll let you know when it's getting close to ready. I might reach out to you between now and then for some links that you might want to, just to make sure that I have everything plugged in the show notes that you want me to plug. A most recent headshot and bio is very helpful. If you can get that on the way to me, and I'll be in touch.
All right, Chris.
Okay. All right.
Take good care. It's great to meet you.
You too. And we'll be in touch. I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
I hope so. Yes. Anything I can ever do, I'll rush to your side if you need me.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Okay. Take care.
All right, bye. Thanks again to the producers at Patreon. Patreon.com/Coralosophy is a place that you can support the mission of this show and underwrite, in part, its recurring costs. And so the producers over there are Ulrika Igrain Munoz Alarcon, Chandler Smith, David Kowalczyk, James Mock, Kyle Peterson, Michael Herron, Ryan Main, Steve and Kathy Kakachik. I really could not do this show without all of those folks over at Patreon, as well as you, the listener, who continues to interact, like, share, comment, leave a rating in the Apple Podcast app, leave a rating on my Facebook page. Anything that you do to interact and tell people that you think the show is a good show and that they should listen is very helpful. Even if you're not able to chip in financially, that actually does save me money. So people who do that to help out are also chipping in financially. It's all a team effort, and continuing to try to build a library of choral professional development resources at coralosophy.com. I mean, it's really getting to be to the point where that's what it is. I mean, it is a library of resources, and some of the conversations that have occurred on this channel are It's 2 years into this. My goodness, there's a lot of stuff there. So head over to coralosophy.com and look under the tab, the show, and you will see sorted categories, a lot of different types of conversations. And of course, you can email me at coralosophy@gmail.com or join the Facebook page, Coralosophers, and be part of the conversation. Thanks, everybody.